I was born in the Bronx. You can take the girl out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the girl. And that seems to be true. I'm here in the studio that Myron and I share. Myron is an artist, a collector, and a great inspiration, a super partner to live with and play with. And forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
My Bishat. Yeah. I did not speak English until I went into kindergarten. So the first 4.5 years of my life was all in Yiddish. I remember being sent to the grocery store to pick up some butter for my mother, and I went into the grocery store and I asked for putter. And several people, she's speaking Yiddish, how cute, how cute. It was very Jewish, but not in any way Orthodox. It was just we were Jewish. We didn't light Shabbos candles, but we had Shabbos. If we were lucky, we had a whole challah. At a young age, I went to a Yiddish challah, which was not the worker circle, Madeleine, but it was, I forget, IWO, International Workers Order, was to the left of Workman's Circle. When I went to high school, by that time I could speak English quite well, and I was an art major, so I went to music and art high school. And that was the other love of my life, was art, which I started as a little bitty kid sitting on the floor drawing with crayons on the baseboard. I learned embroidery because my mother wanted me to know how to do embroidery, but my mother had spinal meningitis as a child, and her hands trembled, and she couldn't really do it. So she showed me at a young age how to thread needles. I did that. And then I would look at the embroidery that my grandmother had made in Europe, where she still was when I was a child and was lost there with lots of other Jews during the Holocaust. And I copied what I saw in terms of stitches. You go up and you go down, and then sometimes you go around and you do things. And I have 2 pieces of her work, and they taught me all I know about sewing, really. And I learned from her. Her name was Chaya Fagel. My daughter's name is Chaya Fagel, her Yiddish name. So it's like a bird of paradise. I started teaching in the late 60s. Karen was just an infant. We were living in Princeton, New Jersey, myself, my former husband, and my 2 sons. And there were people there who wanted me to draw for them something that they could sew that was Jewish, like a challah cover or something like that. And that was what my grandmother had done back in the shtetl, and it seemed like a natural thing to do. And so I did. And after a bit, a few of the women said, this should be a book or something. So they took some drawings. They went in to see Shocking Books before it became Random House, was in New York. They went in to see the editors at Shocking. And Shocking, or the editor Beverly Coleman, was quite impressed, and she said, "Oh, great, I want to meet the author." I was never an author, but I got on the bus and I went to New York and I met with Beverly, who was lovely, and she became my editor. So I had a contract, I had a check, I had a lovely editor, and I wrote The Work of Our Hands. It did very well, and within a year it went from being a hardbound book to being a paperback too. Pesach pillow here, you see a little purple square. We still use that, of course, for Pesach. The ketubah, we've used that as our ketubah. After doing the work of our hands, I realized, and people realized, there was nothing about Hanukkah in it. So I proceeded to do a book called the Hanukkah Book. And wow, there are a lot of Jewish artists out there making Hanukkah lamps and dreidels and all kinds of things. This is a picture, you can see it, of my family lighting a Hanukkah lamp. My son still has that lamp. One of the Hanukkah lamps that I made is this one, which is at the Jewish Museum in New York City. This is the one I made for Workman's Circle. Okay, and you can see that if you look really close, you'll see that it's multi-ethnic. The statues are multi-ethnic. Some face forward, some face backwards, which that was true here too, and we still have a very ambivalent attitude towards immigrants. And in that I was a children of immigrants, it was very important to me. When I started doing this, lots of people started to write to me and to say that I do this and I do that, and and I thought, hey, should be another book, the Jewish Yellow Pages, and write about the different people who are making different things. And so it has a lot of chapters, sections. My daughter's hands writing. I made this chess set. And one of the things you do during Hanukkah is you play games, and chess is a good game. And one of the games was the Maccabees were on one side and the Assyrians were on the other side. It was just fun looking up old costumes and doing them sort of to give a feeling of period pieces. And for the corner I'd have castles, and it was like being a kid again, playing with clay and making things like that. And paper cutting was something, again, I learned as a child, but then as I got older and went to museums and stuff like that, I saw some incredible Jewish paper cuts at places like the Jewish Museum. And the stories I just keep learning and hearing and knowing, based from where they come, God only knows from where they all come, these folks' tales. I like stories. And one of the Jewish arts I learned to make in my mother's kitchen was paper cutting. And she said that the women would cut with a scissor and the men would cut with a knife. And I thought that was always interesting. But I found that when it came time to making an elaborate paper cut, I needed to cut with a knife. So I cut with an X-Acto blade to make all these intricate cuts. I had it in my head to do a whole series of 12 or 13 or 18 Jewish paper cut, prints. But I really ended up doing exactly 1, 2, 3, and 4. This particular story print, the story is about a seamstress. Once there was a poor seamstress who had been orphaned as a child and widowed as a young mother and knew only a life of drudgery and hardship. And she stitched from dawn until night and sang, sometimes out loud and sometimes silently whispering. Year after year she sewed and sang. The garments which came from her hands were many and varied. She repaired a farmer's overalls as carefully as she embroidered a bridal gown. Yet the songs she sang remained the same. It wasn't a song or a tale over and over to whatever various melodies came to mind, she sang the alphabet, the letters of the alphabet. Finally, her neighbors, amazed at the endless variety with which she sang the same letters, asked her why she sang no other song, and she replied, I've always wanted to be learned to sit in the study house and the house of prayer, to understand the order of the universe, to pray to the master of us all. And yet it has been my lot to learn only the alphabet. And so each day I give back to the Lord what has been given to me. And with his greater understanding and compassion, he can form the letters and into prayers and praises to suit himself. So it's sort of a very womanly, ironic answer, and I like it.
It's wonderful.
I'm the children of immigrants, and the image for me is always very strong of being on a boat and coming to America. And my father told me his story of doing that, and my mother told me her story of doing that, and then they met at the Yiddish Theater in New York. That's a whole other story. Promise, I saw that as a photograph in some book, but I transferred it to and made a screen print out of it, which Myron then printed for me. And what you have is the immigrant parents, the child looking at the Statue of Liberty from their perspective on the boat. And that's what's there. The quilt. Okay, the quilt is 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, 30 by 30 inches, and it was based on a photograph of the what was called the Jewish street in San Mateo. You look at this particular square, it says in Spanish, Carrero Judeos, okay? The Jewish street. And it's a photo that I then transferred the photo to fabric in order to sew it into what is meant to look like an alleyway, and that's exactly what was left of the Jewish street. So when I am in Spain and go to different villages, I often am looking for leftover Jewish life, and that's what there often is. I have a house actually in Spain in a town called Villafames, and I always wondered, was there a Jewish community? Was there? There must have been. And finally, after years of beating on the historian, he told me that yes, and he showed me where things were. What is now a closed-off well was at one point a mikveh, and the street adjacent, right next to mine, to ours was a street called Carreros. Carreros means porters or schleppers. Well, that was a Jewish profession. That was the Jewish street right next to mine. And so our house was once a Jewish house. It is a Jewish house all over again. This is a neighboring town, well, not that neighboring, it's a few miles away, called Girona or Gerona. It's further up north. And again, this is more abstract. I now live part of every year still in Villafames, Spain. And Spain is always in my heart. My first challah cover I ever made is this one. And I made this is silk, and I made it in Japan. I bought a piece of silk, and I wrote Shabbat, and then embroidered it, because I was living in Japan and on a little Japanese house in a Japanese village, Ishiki Hayama, right near the Emperor's Summer Palace. My ex-husband was then in the Navy. He was on a Navy base, and I wanted something Jewish. So I made my first Shabbos challah cover. And the following year, in '57, there I was in Minnesota. I needed a different challah cover, so I crocheted this one. This is Shabbat. I like about it, this is special. This is an old tie that was my father's. And it has that. Okay, this is an old one. Let's say 1964. Oh, yeah. And it says on the back, made with love for my family in memory of the 6 million This is another using some of the same fabrics that I had used on the round one. There's a quilt up there, has nothing to do with anything Jewish, but it was sure fun. It's a lap robe for Harley Davidson, because in another life I might be that little blonde lady sitting on that Harley, you know? I feel like I have been very lucky or blessed, whichever you want to call it, blessed or lucky, to have gotten the recognition I've gotten, which is a lot, you know, and to go from, you know, kid in the Bronx to making art, to being in museums around the world, to writing 7 books, and they're all out there doing their thing. And so if you want to make art, make it. Follow your interest, both in the medium, in the subject matter, and in the time you put into it. It takes, you know, what they call in Yiddish, Sitzfleisch, tachas time, right? You got to sit there and do it. There's no other way. I love to make things, and I hope to be able to continue, you know, on and on.